Hi Avi, this is Pedro replying to your reply to my video. So I've got to try and remember what I've already replied in my initial response to you, which I think covered the bit about appearing to speak for God, and I think perhaps on what it is that we need to be saved from. I think that was covered. Oh yes, the God is a male being, calling God he. The reason I do that is that simply in the original Old Testament, in the Hebrew language, the name of God is in the male gender, and that follows through in the Greek. Also, the New Testament says that God showed himself through a human who was born in Bethlehem and later crucified in Jerusalem, or rather just outside Jerusalem. That being was male. That's why I call him him. The thing about the universal truth, appearing to present a universal truth, this is the old argument, isn't it, about absolutes, and are there absolutes? There are absolutes in our world. I remember seeing an old photograph taken back in the early days of cinematography, and they'd rigged up the cameras to photograph this birdman who was going to fly from the top of the Eiffel Tower. Now, and he flew from the top, except he didn't. He fell like a stone. Actually, there was quite a bounce at the end too. Very unpleasant, but there is an absolute truth, and that's gravity. Things drop. It was actually established by the first caveman who ever dropped a rock on his foot. And later on Newton gave a name to it, called it gravity. I don't know why. Perhaps it's because it's such a serious matter if you do drop a rock on your foot. But that's an absolute. There are certain things that it seems to me there are physical laws that are absolutes, therefore why not spiritual laws that are absolutes? On the whole question of belief, this is a very interesting matter, because clearly there are two things working here. One is what I call everyday faith, the faith that enabled me to sit in this chair that I'm sitting in without even checking it to make sure that it would stay up. The faith that operates when we switch on a light, assuming that the illumination will occur when we do that. The faith we use when we post a letter, snail mail, into a letterbox, that in spite of sort of wind, fire, flood and strikes, it will actually get to the destination that we intend it to reach. But what's more important is the faith that I have in God. This is more important to me, I mean. And I'm not quite sure how to approach this. So would it help if I shared with you how I came to what I would call meet with God? You see, I was at a meeting, at a Christian meeting, and I was attending a Christian church at the time. This was in another church. And I was a man who was religious, I suppose, because I felt it was the right thing to do, because I had a need. My grandfather, to whom I was very close indeed, had died, and I had a lot of questions that I couldn't find any answers for. At this particular meeting, I can't remember what it was, but I said something outstandingly stupid. A habit which I've not entirely got rid of yet, I must confess. And what I said got a response from behind me, from somebody sitting behind me. But he said to me, well, what do you think happens when you die? Do you think you just step into a black void? And you know, that really bothered me, because I knew that wasn't true. I can't tell you how I knew. I can't give you any reasons, but I just knew that the human experience, the way that we can communicate across thousands of miles and find points of agreement, points of disagreement, points of interest, things that we're both interested in, I think is immensely exciting. I just cannot believe this is snuffed out. And this sharpened it up. And later on that evening, I was in somebody's house and waiting for them to go home, and or waiting for us to go home. They came back, and they'd been at this prayer meeting, and I just knew I could not leave. I could not physically move from the settee upon which I was sitting and go home. And they said, well, what's the problem? And I said, I can't leave till I have got what you've got. And they said, well, what have we got? To which I remember replying, if I knew, I wouldn't be asking, because I'd get it. And they shared with me about Jesus, about that problem I mentioned in my last video, of original sin, about how Jesus had been sent by God to do that. That's what they believed. And I just had this incredible conviction inside me that this was right, and that Jesus was real. And during that night, I asked Jesus to become Lord of my life. And I have to say that since that time, there have been so many occasions when the reality of Jesus has been there. And I suppose if I tried to quantify this with something that people could, as it were, look up, I would point to a verse in Ecclesiastes, where it is written that He, that's referring to God again, that He has put eternity in their hearts. That's talking about people in general. And it's as if we've, all of us, been born with this space inside us, and we're like a jigsaw puzzle going around with a missing piece, and that single missing piece, according to the Bible, is Jesus. And when we, as it were, receive that piece that of Jesus, and actually believe in Him in our hearts, suddenly we become whole, and we have the potential to become all that God wanted us to be. And I was so interested in your comment when you said that you could conceive as God as a symbol of all that's good and fine. I'm sorry, just looking for your words. Everything that's fair and just, moral and compassionate. A symbol which is a role model of human behaviour. My question is, obviously, I would say that I have met the role model for human behaviour, which is Jesus, but how can a symbol be a role model? That's what puzzles me. I mean, I agree with you absolutely that ideally humans should be fair and just and moral and compassionate, and yet we both know that we don't really have to look beyond ourselves to recognise that we are less than that ideal. However fair and just and moral and compassionate we believe we are, we know there are areas where we've failed. We know there are areas where we don't come up to the mark. And I know that is still true for me. But what I do know is this: I have peace. And I have a peace that sort of comes from knowing that God is on my side, and that He is real, and that He is the one who can help me through life. You called me a mortal. What the Bible calls me is somebody who's actually born again, a child of God. I think it's a beautiful description. What the Bible also says, that all of us will live forever. The big issue is, do we live forever in the presence of God or not in His presence? And to not live eternally in the presence of God is clearly pictured as not being to our advantage. But thank you, Avi, and I look forward to hearing from you.